The difference between beers and doers, and the revelation that God is, I believe, is really now putting together for both camps, the beers and the doers, and how to bring a balance to that. So we're talking about the parable of the talents, and this will be part 4 of this discussion or this message. So you left off last time talking a little bit about the beers and the doers, and I mentioned that at the very end so that we could get into it on this session. For many years, well, really by nature, we are made up to do. You know, we're given our abilities for a reason, and that's to create as God creates, and we're made to be co-creators with Him. From the very beginning, you could see where man put his hand to something and developed and created. And so God's given us that ability by nature to go out and do. The being part is a little more difficult in the way each individual is, according to their personality, whatever type they are. If they're a type A, the otter personality, the lion, and all the rest when you do those personality tests. So it's a little more difficult to just be without putting our hands to something. And so that's where the intimacy comes in. That's where the time spent with God and His Word and prayer and just hanging out in a state of peace and rest, getting refreshment and listening to Him, listening for Him, waiting upon Him, and all the rest. We all do that a little differently, don't we? We do it according to our personality. If one likes to sit and read and is real quiet, the other one likes to lay down and do the same. Or another person likes to walk and listen. Or have a conversation around a cup of coffee and, sitting there at the dining table. And the other one just silences themselves and listens to worship music. However it is that you spend your quality time with the Lord, not just doing, but being, is very important to the Lord. Because after all, He saved us to be, not as much as the doing part, although that is very important. He brought us to Himself so that He could have relationship with us. But in the midst of that relationship, He wants to do alongside of us with our abilities that He's given us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be made up the creatures that we are, the human beings that we've been made to be, with our capacities and abilities to think, create, develop, make things happen, and to look all around us and see all of the inventions that were made. Excuse me, and the list goes on. So for so many years within the church structures we've known it to be in the Western world, has been all about the Great Commission, which is very important. But in somehow getting all wrapped up in the Great Commission, we have neglected to have some quality away time with the one that gave us the Great Commission to begin with. And so that's why we've seen all of the chaos in the church that we have, from the pastors and ministers doing all kinds of crazy things, falling and committing adultery and embezzlement, and on down the line. They, for whatever reason, they haven't dealt with the weightier issues within. They've just been focused on the doing part. And see, the being with the Lord deals with the strongholds in our life in a way that doing cannot. See, because if we're prone to do all the time, then what do? We run from our emotions, we run from the strongholds, we run from the issues, and we cover it up all in the name of doing for the Lord. And so we bury ourselves in work, we bury ourselves in the call, we bury ourselves in our gift, and we don't know how to have balance. Well, God's changing all of that. He's helping us a little bit. And what He's done is He's dropped this revelation that's always been there, but it's sort of come alive in our generation, about how much he really does love us and care for us, and how much rest he truly has given us by way of the finished work. When Christ said it is finished, he meant it. He's not going to get up on the cross and do it all over again just because we don't feel good about ourselves, or because we just can't hack it by way of finding our identity, or whatever the many plethora of reasons is that we give, the excuses or the stuff that we throw out at him. And because it is finished, he has given us the revelation of receiving that finished work, and it has caused rest in our souls, rest in our hearts, and rest in our minds, to the point to where it's made some folks sit down and realize, excuse me for a moment, get some water here. It's caused some folks to sit down and realize, wait a minute, I have been doing this out of my own strength, and now I'm feeling such refreshing and such peace and such calm within my heart and soul, my mind, that it seems unreal. And that's all good and wonderful. But what happens is they become consumed in the being, because then now they have this revelation of the grace and the rest and the mercy and the finished work, that they think that the doing is not important. Utilizing or deploying their gift as a part of the body part functionality, so that the whole body can become a whole and not be lopsided or dysfunctional like it has been for quite some time. And so we get this grace and this rest mentality to the point to where we're like, oh man, I'm good. I can just go and have fun and do my job, and I'm loved. It's finished. I'm going to heaven. Nothing else to do. And see, it's understandable that we get consumed in that. Really, I liken it to a dopamine effect. The dopamine that's produced in our bodies when we have a feel-good experience, we don't want to stop. It's addicting. So we get addicted to the rest and the peace and the being so in love, and he's so accepting of us, and we don't have to work it up, strive it up anymore, that the dopamine, we want to keep triggering that effect. And we become like the guy with the one bag of silver, and we sit on our talent, we sit on our gift, all in the name of it is finished and I have grace consuming me now. Well, the being and the doing, I don't think have to be separated. I think they're one and the same. Jesus was a perfect balance of this. Jesus went about doing good, healing all those that were oppressed of the devil, and he knew exactly who he was in the Father's heart, the Father's mind, and the Father's embrace. He knew exactly. They were one. Him and the Father were one, still are one, and to such a degree where he could do the work and yet be at the same time and live in rest, dwell in rest. See, because when the fruit of the Spirit is produced in us, all 9 of those are elements of rest. The love, the joy, the peace, the patience, the kindness, the goodness, the long-suffering, the self-control. If we are consumed in Him, then they are all elements of rest. We can walk those out as we are doing what we love and living the parable of the talents out by way of our own ability. So that's the time I think we're in right now. God is really highlighting this in the age we live in. And He's saying, look, you can have both. You can do both. You don't have to run away from the doing part just because it's been messed up in the church world and in the minds of men to the degree where it's shattered lives and squelched people's desires and their giftings and their callings. You don't have to live in a mentality of wanting to escape all the time. Escapism, just because things are difficult and because you've been through a lot. No, you can have your cake and eat it too in the kingdom. You really can. I truly believe that in my heart. We can have both. The intimacy and the doing. Now, here's an example of this right out of the Bible. You remember Elijah? Elijah's doing the work of the prophet. He's going down, he's calling down fire. He gets into a jam in his emotions, thinking that Jezebel is going to come take him out right after he has this major victory of calling down fire and consuming all the Baals and the idols and everything else, and the rocks, and it just consumes it all, even the residue left over. Jezebel sends word she's gonna have him killed. He runs for the hills because after a major victory, you have this major low. It usually always happens that way. So he gets consumed in his own ability and his own insecurities as a man, listens to that voice, runs for the hills. God still provides by way of the ravens, still provides for his needs, sends the angels, tells him to get up, get refreshed, go on, continue on. So Elijah finds himself in the cave of despair, saying, "Why me, Lord?" So we know the story. The wind, the rain, the rocks, the lightning, the fire, everything shows up. But God's in none of it. I believe that's an interpretation of what's going on within the soul of Elijah. So God's showing him the torment and the turmoil of his fallen nature, of his lower nature. It's not the real Elijah. It's not the real, genuine, authentic person God has called Elijah to be. It has nothing to do with the gift. It has nothing to do with the real Elijah. So God is showing him a picture, a mirror, if you will, of his own soul. Plain and simple, he says God's not in it, right? But then the still small voice came, and that's where God was, right in the middle of the still small voice. And what does he say to Elijah? He says, "Come to the front of the cave. I want to speak to you." Okay, so he shows him all the wind, the rocks, the fire, the lightning, and all that. Okay, then the still small voice comes, and he says, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Well, that's a pretty heavy question, considering Elijah knows deep within what he's supposed to do, who he really is. He knows that, just like you do, just like I do. We know what our capabilities are to a degree. We know what our value is. We know what we're capable of by way of going after our dream and stretching ourselves in our talents and our skills and our abilities. We know what we're capable of. And so did Elijah. He just saw what he was capable of by believing God to send down the fire. He had a major victory. So he's standing in the cave, running away from his call. God addresses him. "What are you doing here?" He wanted to see what was in Elijah's heart. Wanted to see what Elijah was going to say and what was going to be reflective of his tumultuous soul and his mind at the time. So, Elijah answers. Tells him his sad story, his sob story of what happened. And all God says, he reminds him of who he is by telling him to go back and finish the job. To go back where he came from and anoint a prophet in his place. So, in other words, it wasn't a disqualification in my mind. It was, look, Elijah, you've had some major victories. I understand the frailty of man. I'm telling you to pick yourself back up, believe in who you really are, who I've called you to be. You know it inside. I'm just reminding you. Now go back and be a mentor to Elisha. And then your time has come. You've done your work. Your time is coming soon. I want you to release the reproduction anointing, the multiplication upon Elisha. He's going to do twice as much. So God is always reminding us about the being and the doing. And here's where it is. The doing took place by Elijah releasing the anointing of the major victories that he had. Going about doing good. Going about revealing the heart of God by way of being a prophet. Prophesying. Installing the goodness in people of God. The good nature of God. Reminding them. Doing the good works of God, right? Okay, so there's the doing. The being was the times that Elijah had away with the Lord, listening to him, but also being reminded in the midst of his torment and his turmoil. And so it's a combination of being and doing as we move and have our being in him. As we go through our victories, as we go through our defeats, as we go through those challenges and adversities, the being and the doing are there. We like to separate it. We like to say it's got to be one or the other. In the church world, it's the revelation now is say, hey, I got grace, I got love, the unconditional love of my Father, and now I can just rest in that and not do anything the rest of my life, because after all, it's not about works, it's not about any of that, so I can just be. Well, that's honorable thinking that way to a degree, but remember what the kingdom of God is about. If you go back to the parable of the talents and many other illustrations of what the kingdom is about, it's about doing good according to your own ability. Proof of that, again, is right in not only 1 Corinthians 12 and Romans 12, where he talks about the body parts, right? But it illustrates it over and over again by Paul being called out to preach to a certain people group, and the same with Peter, the same with the rest of the disciples, their own individual assignments, the same with all of the prophets and the apostles before them. Abraham, he calls them out to be a father of many nations. Noah is building an ark for 120 years as an example, and then he continues on and repopulates the earth after the flood, and on it goes. We can call it David, called out as king. And that wasn't even God's first choice. But he had an assignment, nevertheless, and so did Solomon. And the list goes on. Jesus had an assignment to do. So what have you been given to do? That's the question. I'll ask it over and over again. What have you been given to do to express and to reveal and to show who Christ is, regardless of your age? Does it stop when you have a nice fat retirement fund in the bank and you felt like, well, I've worked my brains out for an employer and I'm tired. I just want to rest. I just want to enjoy myself. And it's all about you now. It's all about selfishness and keeping every good thing that the Lord has given you to yourself, instead of carrying on a legacy and sharing that wealth with everyone around you in your gift. It's not that difficult. It's really not. Discovering what that gift is. It may be multiple gifts, but it'll be a cluster that's within a foundational gift of who your makeup is and who you were made to be. Like mine, for example, is writing and speaking. They're two main gifts. But I also have a business anointing, and I can get businesses started and I can hand them off to somebody else. I'm more of an apostolic type of person where I can start something, hand it off, and then come back and oversee it. Or oversee it from a distance or on the internet. We can do things much differently now because of technology. Okay, so there's several things that I can do, but the foundation of what it is teaching and instructing. Okay, so that's my main gift, if you will. But there's several that come off of that main one, like a cluster. So it can be multiple, but there'll always be like a base core of what it is. So, for example, in business, you're going to be called to a certain industry and have a certain niche, but it may branch out from there, but it'll always come back to your core passion or your core desire. So if your passion is coffee, for example, as a business, well, there's many different things you can do within that coffee industry, right? You can have a coffee shop, you can have a coffee drive-through, you can have a coffee roaster, you can be a coffee supplier, you can be a coffee buyer, you can be a coffee guru in the fact that you can go around and give seminars and speeches about coffee. You can be a coffee taster and go around and do tastings. You can be a coffee mentor by helping other people get their businesses started. So, but everything's centered and comes back to that foundational passion of coffee. Okay, but here's the trick in the whole deal. Is say you're a you just love to bake. You've always loved to bake since you were a little boy or a little girl. And you've been around the baking industry, it's been generational. And you love to bake a certain item. Let's say it's a pastry, and you're really good at it. And you're even getting into the whole organic, healthier side of things because you have a passion to see people get healed of diabetes, and so you want to give them an alternative. So you go into that. Well, that's your passion. So baking and making and creating and coming up with different ingredients, and it's centered around that. But then all of a sudden you find yourself saying, well, people are telling me to go in business, to start my own business and show these things to the world and let people know how great they are. And so then you get into the business side of things, you get into the paperwork, administrative, and then you get really frustrated. And you get depressed because you just can't seem to make it flow like it does with making that pastry. So this is where you have to get a little discernment going on, inquire of the Lord and say, Lord, do you want me to stick with just the baking and bring someone alongside of me that's passionate about paperwork and administrating and doing the business side of things? See, we can't just think that because we love doing something that we're automatically going to start a business out of it without the right people in place. That's why God brings a team around us. He brings a team of people that will complement, and they'll be passionate about paperwork. They'll be passionate about the design of that business, the architecture, the all the intricacies of how to make it flow with the marketing and the sales aspect end of things. Because I guarantee you, if you love to bake, chances are, and that's your gift, it's a real flow and you do it easily, chances are you may not be wired for the sales and the marketing end of things. This is where you have to gauge it by, is there a flow or not when you put your hand to it? And see, it goes back to the parable of the talents. Each according to their own ability. That's where we need to stay and to stick and to remain. Now, you can get creative and have a cluster, like I mentioned, but if there's not a flow, then you need to back up and slow. Slow down with what you're doing until the right people come in place. But you can still keep baking for your family and friends and keep doing that and making money that way if you want to. Or if someone's around you that's business savvy, then make sure that they're going to have your best interests at hand and they're called to you so that you complement one another and flourish in that calling. So the being and the doing are intertwined. They can be one, and they should flow in such a way to where they're in step and in tune with one another as we go. Doesn't mean we don't separate and have our quiet time and that special time. It's like my wife always says, there's a difference between quality time and just time. There's quality time is together, listening to one another, sharing with one another, and really focused on each other. And then there's just time together where we're doing the busy things, where we're doing. But again, we're doing it together, right? We're doing it together, and it doesn't have to be this separate thing to where there's such a huge chasm in between is what I'm trying to get at, to where we think that we can't have both. And that's where the church gets into trouble. And we think that the being gets all wrapped up into control. Uh-oh, somebody's going to control me again because they're doing. And they're the titleitis and people wanting to have titles and positions and all of this. And so we're going to get wrapped up into the striving and the sweat and the toil. And we're going to lose the being aspect. No, God has downloaded both for a reason. And now because we've come out of that, we've received some sort of healing, at least some of us have, and we've gotten the being down a little bit. Doesn't mean we'll ever master it, to a degree, because it's a relationship. It's not like mastering a skill. Relationship is fluid, or it's supposed to be. There's supposed to be fluidity to it for the rest of our lives, and so there's a give and take, and we can certainly have both, doing and human being, and we shouldn't be afraid that something bad's going to happen where we're going to get wrapped up into sweating it out again in our own strength. That's why grace has been downloaded to us in this time. So he can reassure us that, hey, I love you, I'm with you, I'm smiling upon your gift, I'm smiling with you so that you can go forward and just enjoy every minute of the time with me as you're showing everybody who I am by way of doing what you enjoy according to your own ability.